And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Michelle Ledbetter, hospice nurse who had a life-transforming near-death experience. Michelle, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you so much. It is an honor to be here, and I'm super grateful that the universe aligned to this so that we're meeting now.
Well, it's my honor to have you here sharing with us. Michelle, if you don't mind, let's start on the day that you had this NDE and go from there.
Okay, wonderful. So I do want to preface this by saying that, what I'm about to share is going to resonate with some people, and those people that are in a place where it's time for them to hear this, it will move them into that next level. And I absolutely acknowledge that there are people that won't necessarily get it. But if those people that are on the cusp and they're willing to open their mind, check out their beliefs, and be curious about a different perspective, I think a lot can be gained in what I have to share. And my hope is that if I can just help one person move to that next level, then it's all worth it.
Well, I think you're going to be potentially helping thousands of people.
Wow. I should have gotten tissue because I do tend to get emotional, but it's my emotional joy that kind of flows through my eyes. So, but we'll move through this.
All right. So
if it pops up, bear with me.
It's all right. So you were in a car accident?
Yes. So I am a hospice nurse, and in 2019, I had taken an assignment to travel. I've always been of the mindset that I've got to get through this life and get as much of it in as I can. And so an opportunity came up, and so I decided to do hospice travel work. I took an assignment in Colorado, and that assignment ended a little bit prematurely. They found another person to come in and take that place. So I had about a 3-week period between the time I finished there and I was going to be able to get a new assignment in Texas. So during that 3-week time, I thought, I'm just going to go visit my friend in Montana because it's one of my most favorite, beautiful places in the world, I believe. And so I shared time with him. And as it approached the time for me to leave, there was a big snowstorm coming. And I was in a little 2 front wheel, drive Toyota. And I wanted to miss that storm. And so I took off a day earlier than I had expected to get to Texas on time. And when I woke up that day, I was just feeling off. And I don't know exactly how to articulate it, but I was feeling dizzy. I wasn't feeling real connected, just kind of maybe even like, I can't say a hangover feeling, but it just wasn't real clear. Like I just felt like not quite right. And so the first part of me, my leg to get out of Montana, we were on a slope, an incline, and we had to get out, but my little 2-wheel wouldn't get me out. So we had to call for people to come and get me up to the top of this little shelf that I could take off. And in my mind, I thought, I got to keep going because I've always been a very driven person trying to find the next thing that brings me joy. Right. So I felt like I just got to keep pushing past, but there was a little voice that said to me, maybe you need to slow down a bit. I got on the road, and as I'm driving through the magnificent woods and terrain of Montana, just in awe of the beauty there. Everything in Montana seems to be bigger, everything's big. I'm driving, and I see a hawk off to my left, and it flew down and crashed into my front windshield. And I'm driving probably about 55, 60 miles an hour on a road. And it startled me, it scared me. And my first thing was, oh my gosh, I hope I didn't hurt it. So I look in my rear view mirror and the guy takes off. So I was like, oh, well, thank goodness I didn't hurt the bird, right? But everything is bigger in Montana. This thing, the wingspan was the span of my windshield. So it was huge, significant, hard bump, got my attention. I went on to continue. I had to stop in a little town in Montana to get a TB skin test read. I was still feeling so off. When I got there, I got out of the car and I just had like a sense of lost direction. It was just a very odd feeling, but I pushed through like I normally do. I got that done, kept thinking, man, I don't know what's quite wrong. I don't know what's wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it. I rolled the window down, to try and get some fresh air. And so I pulled in, and I started at like 6 a.m. This is about 6 p.m. And I thought, I just can't make it any further. And so I pulled into a rest stop, and I kicked my chair back for a second, and I just got an uncomfortable feeling, almost like a spooked feeling that, just keep going. So in my mind, I rationalized, even though I know I'm tired and I know I'm not totally with it 100%, I had 23 miles to go to the next town. And the last thing I remember, so this snowstorm just came in with a vengeance, and the snow was coming across, so it wasn't even falling down, it was sideways. And I remember seeing on the billboards that there was what do they call it, with the vertical height of certain things wasn't recommended because of this wind that was blowing and the snow that was going. I forget what they called that, but high profile vehicle alert or something. And I thought, well, I'm a low profile vehicle. I'm just going to cruise on. I'm going to keep on going. And again, I still was having that funny feeling in my head. And the last thing I remember in my conscious mind was seeing truck lights in front of me that were red. And I knew that we were getting ready to go over a pass. And so I thought, I'm just going to follow the lights, because I couldn't see the sides of the road. Everything was so distorted with that blizzard. And the next thing I remember, I felt myself kind of shift to the right, and I thought, I am in trouble. And then nothing after that. When I woke to the ambulance. So the police had already come. There was only myself and that semi truck that I know in a span of distance. So I'm not sure how they actually knew where I was. But apparently what happened is, as I was going up over the pass, I didn't turn with the truck lights, and I went off to the right and went off the mountain. And so the car went up into the air and then slammed down. And in that slamming down, I had an L1 burst fracture in my spine. And I also had a significant closed head injury. But I awoke to the paramedics, asking me if I was okay. And I just remember there was an intense pain in my chest area. I couldn't get a big breath. It was like the wind had been knocked out of me. And the next thing I looked, my little dog was traveling with me. And so I looked over to make sure she was okay. And I saw on the front windshield that she had impacted it because it had just cracked. And so I was very concerned about her. The next thing I noticed, I've soiled myself. And so my ego pops in, and I'm embarrassed for a second. And then it kind of goes blank again. I don't remember too much after that. The next thing that I remember, I am being pushed into this was close to Loveland, Colorado. So that was where they took me. They pushed me into I was on the gurney being pushed in to the emergency room. And I remember these two handsome men there that were escorting me in, who are the paramedics. And I recognized again, I was worried about my dog. They had placed her in my lap. And so I immediately saw that she was riding with me, all was well. And I just thought to myself, those are the most beautiful people I've ever seen. And I was more in the physical form, right? Beautiful physical people that were helping me. And so the place that they originally took me didn't have a trauma center. And after they did the testing, they realized that I needed surgery like right away. There was no time to wait for that. So they transported me. Now I'm back out again. I don't remember this part, but what I'm told, they transferred me to the hospital where they could do the trauma. I remember waking up to a nurse that again was just angelic looking to me, and the need to make sure that my dog was okay. And I hear them saying, and she's still on my lap. I hear them saying, we're going to have to impound her. And I was like, oh, please don't impound her. She's already been through so much. Like, can we just not do that? And this nurse piped up, and she doesn't know me from Adam. And she said, you know what, honey? I got you. You're going to be here for a couple weeks. As soon as my shift is over, we'll put her in a little crate. I'll take her home with me. I'll bring her up to visit you. I've got you. And I just thought, oh my gosh, there are angels on earth, right? And I was at a place in my life that I had just kind of lost that positive feeling of people's goodness. And I was in a struggle, doing the struggle of the grind of trying to do the next right thing to get my award of saying that my life was worth something, as many of us get into that grind. But the people that served me in that moment just made my heart feel at ease. And the next thing I remember is the two guys that had transported me originally were coming in with a basket with a little ugly stuffed dog and some magazines to just let me know that, we got you. And I was so moved by their kindness. And working in the medical profession, I know there's a lot of non-kind people that are not in it for the reason, but they think that money is, and it's not fair, but they go into it for the wrong reason. And I thought, man, my lucky day, these people are the best. I met the surgeon and he said, honey, we got to do it tonight. So now I think my accident, when I looked on the report, was like around 7:30 that the report happened. So this is later into the night. And he had told me what I thought was an astronomical number of surgeries he'd already done that day. And I was like, oh, please, just wait till tomorrow. We'll be fine. And he said, no, ma'am, I can't do that. I said, well, then at least go get a cup of coffee, like get some food. Cause I was like, I don't want some joker that's had 10 surgeries, me being his last one. Right. The next thing I remember, was a feeling of immense fear. And I woke up to, we call this near death experience. And I have to preface this by saying, I do not believe in death. I believe in the expansion of us back to soul. And so it's more of a near experience of non-physical instead of death, right? Rebirthing. I came to a near physical rebirthing into the non-physical. But it was very scary for me. So the picture that presented in the place that I was in, and it's more than a dream because it was so very vivid. I still have every detail of it, the colors, the temperature, the feelings, which the feelings were significant, of this overwhelming fear. And I walk into this warehouse sort of thing, and the grounds on the outside are very barren with very large equipment on it, but it's almost like they've taken a forest and just cleared it, and there's no trees. And I walk in, and as a nurse, I had a patient who became a friend who was HIV positive, and I see him off to the left in a bed, and his arms were up over the headboard. And he just didn't look comfortable. And my thought went to, I've got to find his partner so that we can get them together. He looks like he's by himself. He's scared. And my daughters were behind me. And I turned to engage them to say, come with me. Let's help. And I'm changing the names here for the sake of privacy, but let's help Mike find Kevin so that, oh my gosh, we got to get him some peace and relief. But I'm still having this really uncomfortable feeling. And as I turned and they acknowledged me, they began to walk out a big door, like you would think in a warehouse, right? And it had a little window. And as the door closed, they were on the outside walking away. I peeked out the window again, and that fear just was like overwhelming. Like, I'm here by myself. They can't hear me. They're not coming back. Why are they leaving me? Like, all these thoughts and emotions are going through my body. And it was just an intense, uncomfortable feeling. And I could not open the door. And I realized I am in this building. I can't get out. It's dark, it's cold, it's warehouse feeling. My friend Mike is obviously in distress, and I can't get his partner to him. Remember, so he was HIV positive, right? Virus. I don't have a fear of that, but this was right before COVID as well. COVID had not come out. And I just felt this immense fear, panic, abandonment. I'm stuck in this warehouse with virus. I have no medicine. I don't know. It was just a complete feeling of panic and fear, and abandonment was huge for me. And then all of a sudden I noticed that there was cracking in the ceiling, and my thought went to, oh, it's going to be like lava coming in on me, right? I am in hell. I am in hell. And, I guess the worst thing that my imagination could come up with for what hell was, I was in it and feeling all the emotions of it. And the emotions were significant. Okay, so I'm going to come back to that. But as the ceiling started to break and crack, it was almost like the pieces wanted to lift, but I had so much fear that if those lifted, I was going to be that the color was the immense yellow with a hue of orange, and it reminded me of lava. And I thought, this lava is going to come in and just sear me while I'm in my deepest ever. Like, this sucks, right? So the next thing I remember, waking to an African-American lady in my room, and her explaining to me that she was there to make sure I didn't get out of bed. So apparently, as I'm moving through this altered state of reality, I'm acting it out as well. I don't know this, but apparently I'm acting it out. So they have to call sitters to stay with me to keep me safe. And I remember, I just want to get out. It was that feeling of, I want out of this uncomfortable feeling, the emotions, the everything. The vision had left at that point, and she went over to sit on a chair, and all of a sudden she turned into my half sister, who I did not meet until I was in my 30s. And she was sitting in that chair. And in my mind, I knew that it wasn't really her, but it was her. Like, it was very hard to distinguish. In my logical mind, I knew it wasn't her, but it was so her. And so I looked over at her and I said, why won't you help me? Why are you not helping me? And when we think about time, I don't know if this was in the lineage of me being in ICU for 8 days. I can't tell you exactly where these certain things came in the timeline. Time is, it's abstract. It's just everything kind of flows together at the same time. So when I did finally wake up out of this and I realized what had happened, and I knew that I had just been to hell, or totally believed that I was just in hell, I thought, I'm not telling nobody about this, because of course, the humanness that I am, we have, we seek validation from outside, whether we recognize it or not. And it's like, I don't want anybody to think I'm such a bad person that I just went to hell. So I kept it a secret. I was too ashamed to share it. But the people, the actual physical people in this reality that we know, the nurses and the staff, they were beyond anything I had experienced in my nursing career, as far as going above and beyond in their kindness. And it was almost like they were infused with some magic that just left me feeling peaceful when I was in my aware state. And although I had no family and I was by myself, that sense of fear when I was in my awake state was like, they've got me. I'm okay with this. So fast forward a little bit, I was denying this. I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to even talk about it. I just was like, I gotta switch something up, because I'm not going there again. And so after breaking my back and having the traumatic brain injury, I wasn't able to return to work for quite some time. I was told 6 months, but at 5 months, I had no insurance, because I was in a 30-day, that window where it's like 90 days before you get your insurance. So my drive was back in my ego. I got to do. I got to get back to work. I got to do what I got to do, doing the same kind of life that I had done before. I get back to work, and I'm trying to not look at what happened over here, because it's just not comfortable for me. And I start having events that in life are really hard. I was fired from a job that I absolutely loved. And this is after the fact. Granted, I probably went back to work too soon, and I was not performing at my optimal best. But in my mind, I was I was doing really good. So being a hospice nurse and knowing that that is my calling and it being taken away from me in a way that did not make sense to me. There was situations around it that was like none of the stuff that happened. I had inquired about some funding that was being used that was a grant money for COVID. And the next thing I knew, life was hell at work. And then I'm fired for what they said I wasn't following Medicare guidelines as a case manager. But the thing is, I worked for that company for on and off for over 20 years. I was a float nurse. I was never a case manager. Long story short, I lost everything. I was completely broke. I have a fifth wheel RV that I still live in. But that was really the only thing to my name. I had no car. My car was completely totaled and I was fired. And at the same time, I was going through, my best friend had a recurrence of cancer and he was in great need trying to do chemotherapy again and wasn't tolerating it. And so he needed the help. And so I heard, which I've heard this voice before. It's, there's voices in your mind that will talk to you in different ways. Some of them will talk to you and tell you you're not good enough or you're not smart enough or you're doing it the wrong way. But then there's a voice that will talk to you that says, if you, like if I built a place by myself with my own means and you stand back and you go, good job. And you feel, proud of yourself for lack of a better word. There's a variation and a vibration of the two different voices. And the higher vibration said to me, if you will just follow my lead and quit resisting, you need to take this and spend this time with Brett, who was his name, Brett. And I thought, well, shit, I'm going to do this because I don't have anything to lose. And we'll see what happens. Long story short, we went through that journey together. He was an unbelievable teacher for me and showing me how to live life to the fullest, no matter where we are. He passed and I still had no job, but I did initiate a lawsuit, and I'm not a lawsuit sort of person. So it was really hard for me to do that, but there was just such injustices I felt. And so I stepped into a place where I thought, okay, life, God, life force energy, universal love, whatever you want to call that we can't grasp. I'm going to try it a different way because I really don't have anything to lose. So my best friend, he passed, but there was a lot of wonderful, wonderful lessons that happened in 14 months that I stayed with him that just brought me up to a different level, if you will, of seeing life a little bit differently. And so he was a catalyst for that for me. And after he passed, I still had no job. And I thought, what now? So I went to a hospice in a different state. I kind of live on the border of Georgia and Florida. And I knew I was going to get that job because I knew that's who I am and that's what I do. I didn't get the job. I didn't get the job. And I was like, what the hell, life? Like, I'm trying to follow your lead. You put this thing in front of me and now I don't get it. I have 15 months that I'm sitting. I have no money. I do have a friend that comes forward to give me enough money for groceries. I am going to places to get food banks to get food. It's a really humiliating time because I had worked so hard to be this, amazing person. So I was really at my low, and I didn't have enough money to get gas to go anywhere. So I had to sit with me. I had to sit with me for 15 months and I got that job potential. It didn't work out. I got pissed off at life. I was like, this just doesn't even make sense. And then a job in a nursing home for a risk manager came open. And I have always been opposed to nursing homes just because I've worked in the field, and where there are some really wonderful ones, it's not a place that I want to go. And in my way of being and doing, I had distanced myself and my children some, and it was in my own false limiting beliefs that I created a barrier between us, when really my biggest issue, I think you heard, was abandonment, right? And I went on to do things that left my children feeling like I had abandoned them. So I had all this stuff swirling in my head, didn't know what was going to happen, got that job offer. And I said, okay, life, if that's the direction you're leading me, I'm going to go for it. I don't want to do this, but maybe I can make a difference. And when it's my time to get in that nursing home, I'm going to pump it up so good that it'll be just magical. So that's the mindset I went into with it. I made more money than I had ever made in my career. And so I thought, oh, that's pretty cool how that happened. It wasn't in my line of work that I think I need to be in. Working that job was, in my quiet time, what I recognized is I didn't even know who I was at the core. I was doing everything that I thought I was supposed to be doing to find happiness. But in each place that I looked, like the books say, marriage, kids, travel, I was doing it all. It would come, but it was fleeting. And there was still this void that I couldn't figure out how to fill that mother up. I couldn't figure out what to do to make it feel better. I got into drinking alcohol. I realized that numbing was nice because I didn't have to feel it for a minute, even though the mornings were horrible. And as I went through this and started to get really honest with myself and look at me instead of looking at outside people, because so as I've gone through my healing of my physical body, my primary family were not the main people there. And so it reinforced this thing of abandonment. But the people that came, they were angels, right? They did help me. And so it's reinforcing this negative idea of I'm not good enough. I'm worth abandoning. They're not. I must not be a very good person. And so it had got me to a place where I was very focused on that. But during that 15 months that I had to sit with myself, I decided I'm going to be open to whatever comes this way. And I'm going to play with life a little bit and see if I can get a hold, because I'd always been a seeker, right? Where is this freaking happiness that everybody says we're moving towards? I have looked in every nook and cranny. I've made some really bad choices looking for this thing called happiness, and I haven't found it. What I recognized during those times, I could go into a place where I would practice the breathing, right? And all those things that they say about meditation. And I thought, I'm just going to do whatever I can do. And so I would get quiet and I would pose a question to the universe about a particular situation. So let's say I've just started this new job. I have some challenging people. They don't necessarily like me because I'm the risk manager and I'm in there to say, you got to change your ways because this is a risk, right? So I'm not a liked person from the position. But when I would come upon a challenge during the day, I decided to trust that life was going to guide me, right? I'm going to go for this. And I would wake up in the morning and I would say, go ahead and show me what it is that I need to see today. And if an event would happen, an interaction with an employee that left me feeling disturbed inside, I would come home, turned off the TVs, and I would sit with myself and say, please help me see this differently, because the way I feel right now is that I'm being judged, they're being mean, all those things that pop up when we become the victim of what's happening outside of us. And at some point in this healing journey, it'll be 5 years or 6 years, 19, forgive me, I'm going to have one of those moments. February 14th, 19 was the accident. So we're however far we're into it. It did take me a few years to unpack it all, right? And then start to look in a different direction and say, I'm open. Otherwise just go ahead and take me out because I've already been to hell. It can't be much worse, right? I can do that. And I started to get the voices, the higher vibration voice speaking to me more. And it would answer questions on helping me to shift a perspective and to see that this was about me learning to love myself, let going of the validation from outside people. And I thought if you would have asked me before the accident, do you care what people think about you? I would have said, oh, no way. But there was still an undercurrent that it really mattered what my children thought of me. So as time goes by and I'm seeing these reflections and I'm hearing these voices and I'm getting these answers, I realize this is about me. This is all about me. And the message was, you have got to get connected to your highest vibration that is within you. Growing up in a traditional religious Catholic environment and seeing the incoherent behaviors versus what was being taught, the fear, that sort of stuff that comes around that whole thing. I too, as many, was indoctrinated into the whole fear belief of the God thing, not necessarily understanding that there was something more. And so if anybody would have approached me about God, even though I was a hospice nurse and I believed in something more, I didn't know what it was, but it was a don't talk to me about God. Because it was just a bunch of hoopla. It was very separating. Religions were separating. And so I wasn't willing to look at that traditional piece of it. I know I'm kind of rambling and going in circles here. Let me see if I could swing back. So in my life, I did what most people do, right? We come up with a certain amount of beliefs. We're indoctrinated. We're told this is how life should be. And this is what you need to do to become happy. And then if it doesn't work, you think something's wrong with me. Why can't I get this right? And we just push and grind through life. And we're so disconnected. Half the time we're just doing the drill. We're just doing the drill. What this has revealed to me is that heaven and hell is a state of mind. And it is where you are choosing to be in the moment. And it took a radical shift to come away from the victim mentality of why are, say, my immediate family, why are they being so mean to me? That whole thought, they're such, why would, that whole mentality of projection. And I started to look at me. And the big, bold answer that came was, you cannot love unconditionally another until you recognize that within you, that is the ultimate love of the life force, energy, God, Mother Earth, whatever you want to call that, that is, you are an extension of that. And you've got to come back to know your worth. You're just coming into this physical form and doing this educational reality that we call life. That shows you your value right there, because you're doing it. You've been given the opportunity. You signed up for it, whatever you want to believe. But I started to work on me. I started to look at the places that were blocking me, where abandonment came up from in the first place. And it always comes up in childhood, right? Where those things came from, and then really unpacking them and undoing them. And I was able to receive visions of people from their perspective, recognizing that the harm that I might have felt somebody did to me, in that person's perspective, they were doing the best they could with what they knew. And so even though some horrific childhood experiences, the compassion that started to form within me after I started looking at my part in all of this, I had to take my part in this, was, they were doing the best they could with what they knew and believed in their life experience that you did with yours up until your accident. And they were just as unhappy as you were. They were looking for happy. They were trying to control, which we think we have control over so much, which we have control over so little, right? Except we do have control over how we choose to perceive it all. And I think that's probably the biggest message. In any event or life happening that is happening to you, it's actually happening for you. And if you're willing to step back and be curious and open that window a little bit to say, how can I look at this from maybe their perspective or a different perspective that's not mine? You can start to see where people are coming from. And you start to realize that if somebody is doing something to you, that's coming from within them. What you do have control over is if that person's actions are causing you to react to them in a way that doesn't feel good, that's about you. That's coming from within you. So that's an opportunity that life is giving you to say, what are my beliefs around this feeling of fear, abandonment, less than? Why am I fighting against other people? What is that about? And so through my life history and my upbringing, I started to see it for what it was. It was like, it's part of the evolution, right? We all have a life journey of childhood. We have a life journey of adolescence and a young adulthood and parenthood and mature adulthood. And then we have an end of life journey. And at any point in the journey, as things are forever changing, we are given an opportunity in our hardships to look at the truth of what they are representing for us and shift our perspective into a way that our emotions align with that higher vibration of who we are, the God essence of who we are. So someone would say maybe you're seeing it through Christ-like eyes. Again, I don't talk real good about religion because I was so opposed to it, but I see now the connections. I see, let me give you a good one. So the story of Jonah and the whale. These people that are claiming that they have found enlightenment and glory and don't look too happy to me are telling me they believe that a fish had swallowed a man. When I sat down in one of those moments of quietness and I said, please help me see this differently, it doesn't make any sense. I was shown that this Jonah was a person whose gift was to help humanity. And so something was going down with this big town of people, and he felt in his heart that he needed to share what he knew so that they would change their ways or something. And I'm not a Bible person, so I'm going to give you the story from my view. He was so fearful of rejection, of abandonment, of what going forward and doing that because of his self-limiting beliefs that his hell was being swallowed by a fish. That would be hell for me too. But the fish being swallowed by the fish is the representation of the fear that consumes people and stops them from living their best life, right? So I was like, oh, I get that. That totally makes sense. There's no fish that could eat a guy, I don't think. Maybe there is, but I just couldn't buy it. So things from my upbringing and things that I had heard started to match into things that I could say the story for the way life is here and now. And so it's about making a choice daily to stay on the higher vibration feelings, recognizing that your emotions are your given gift, that if you are on the lower vibration of emotions, sadness, jealousy, victimhood, whatever those lower vibrations of emotions are, that's your internal guidance to say, you have an opportunity to look at what is that about? Where did that come from? What is the belief and why did you take that belief away? And is it true? And 100% of the time when you backlog into your upbringing, where you first felt it, where you learned it, you recognize it's not even the truth. And so if there's something in the Bible that says the truth will set you free, when you can see it from the perspective of all things are happening for our greater good, to evolve into the highest version of who we are, to connect to that life force energy that is within us and stay in that higher vibrational scale and move through life, you step into the flow of life and you're no longer paddling upstream. You're lifting those oars and saying, what is life going to show me about me today? And the natural effect of that is you move from your head space or the ego space into a heart space, and you're coming from that place the majority of the time. Now, am I going to say that I don't ever get triggered anymore? No, I do. But I just had a recent one where it was a big deal for me. I was denied some time off to go to a high school friend's funeral. And I went into that mode of my old way of being and my ego mind and my separateness from life source energy and God. And I was like, cussing them out underneath my breath. And then I realized, okay, this is an opportunity. And I was able to stop it quick enough to look at it from a different perspective. The people that were telling me I was denied, they were being handed it down from somebody else. Maybe, I said, help me see this differently. And what came to me is maybe this isn't your time to go back to the old high school days, to go back and stay with a mom who you've had some discord with, although I feel complete healing from that. She doesn't necessarily. And so instead of resisting like I normally do, and which I think a lot of people would, I said, okay, this is what it is. And maybe there's something bigger I don't know that is happening here. So I'm just going to let it go. As soon as I let go, within 24 hours, I get a call from a nurse and she said, I've got you covered. You're going. Like, we won't mention this, but I got you. Like, you go. And it's those times where you realize that was given to me as a gift to see, where are you, sister? on your emotional maturity, on your leveling up, and on your staying connected with your God source. Where are you? Oh, started to go down that rabbit hole real quick to the old self. But the beauty of it now is I can flip it pretty quick. It might not be right away, but I can flip it pretty quick. And then the magic of life just starts to open up, and things, I'm now 3 years out from that. I have a beautiful place that I've created here. Money has come to me in ways that I would have expected. And I truly believe that we do have the power to create our reality. And we're fearful of stepping into that because you can be called crazy or you've lost your mind or whatever, right? It's hard to not be in the social norm because we're all looking for acceptance. We're all looking for purpose in our life. We're all looking to say, I want my life, or I hope my life has meaning. And I think the greatest lesson that I received from this near energy birthing into the non-physical, not near death, but that near birthing into a non-physical realm, is that heaven is right here if you want it. And there is not a thing that you can't flip and start looking at it from a different perspective. But it does take work to let go of our beliefs and the barriers that we've created against that love that we're all looking for. And that's who we are at the core. And everybody has it. Everybody has the capability of doing it, but we hold tight to our beliefs, right? Because we don't want to be wrong. But if there are people that are out there that have already experienced some of the magic that comes in life when you set it on attention, just me engaging with you today is one of those things. I haven't talked to too many people. It's my first coming out. You've made it very easy, and I'm grateful for that. But I know that there's divinity in this coming together. It's not just by accident. And you start to see the serendipity, and you start to see the things that are showing up, and you get to jump in and go, okay, let's go for this ride. And I want to do it this way. And it's so beautiful and so magical. This is not going to resonate with everyone, and not everyone's there. And it is hard because we're so attached to our beliefs. But if people are willing to open their mind and say, why is it that I believe what I believe? And is it possible to look at it from a completely different perspective without losing myself? And they make that jump and they do that scary thing, life just seems to open up. And so I do believe that there is greatness beyond this physical form, but I also believe that the greatness can be experienced right here, right now, every day, every minute. And when your emotions say you're not there, you can say, okay, checkmate. What is it? How can I see this situation differently? And it will come to you. And it's just a magical flow of life.
Michelle, thank you for sharing your experience with us. If we go back to the beginning, you were feeling off that day.
Oh, I'm so glad you're bringing that.
So do you think you had the accident because you were feeling off, or do you think you were?
I know now I did.
Oh.
And so thank you for bringing bringing us back to that. So as I was sharing, I was doing the grind of life. I was, anxious, trying to be the best version of what I could be, not necessarily for me, but to impress my outside people. So I would get the validation that, oh yeah, that chick's life meant something, right? It took me a while to get to that and accept that, because that kind of meant that, what's that about? But that's the truth. That is the truth. And I think that's a lot of people's truth that they can't look at. So I was doing those things. I, was married for 18 years, divorced, caused the hardships that those decisions make with children. And I was doing the grind, right? And I had, at a young age, my father had melanoma, and they had given him Valium. And I had a very hard upbringing. I was raised by my father for the first 7 years. He was what they classify as a narcissist, but bless his heart, he was just a broken man who couldn't find his connection, right? And he was doing the best he could with what he thought he did. And it messed me up a lot. But I learned to numb myself at a young age. And so I moved through that. I moved through alcohol. I got addicted to pain medication. And in that, those things become so, no addict ever wants to become an addict, right? But it becomes such an essential part of who you are. And it's so consuming, just like those emotions can be so consuming, that you can't find your way out of it. So to back up to what happened, and it was only in hindsight that I could figure it out. I had been prescribed Xanax to help me sleep. So I was on my assignment. I was having some anxiety when I first lost that first assignment. So I wasn't necessarily taking them the way I was supposed to be taking them, right? I was taking to numb and to not feel the uncomfortableness because I was not good at sitting in my uncomfortable feeling. I ran out of that prescription about 4 or 5 days prior to me taking off. And as a nurse, you would think that I should know this, but I did not. In fact, I didn't even recognize that that's what it was until I was watching a documentary on Take Your Xanax or something on Netflix. And I was like, oh my God, that was it. So I abruptly stopped the medication. And when you abruptly stop Xanax, the chemistry in your mind will jack with you. And so what I was feeling was the aura of a seizure from the withdrawal of that Xanax. Didn't know it, had no clue. For the first year, I kept saying, I don't know what in the hell happened. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. But it was shown to me in one of those quiet moments. And then I was like, oh my God, I did that to me. You know, it was one of those other holy moments. And I could see where I had been through AA programs and I had tried different things. That numbing stuff always it was a little bit bigger than me. And I saw for the first time that the reason people numb, the reason I was numbing is because I didn't like the reality I was creating for myself. And so it was easier for me to take a substance than I didn't have the backbone that some people, they don't drink, but they have other stuff that they, fill that with. And the compassion I have for people that are in that state. And one of the things I didn't like about not going to AA and all that is you can never drink again. I was like, well, I kind of like to have a glass of wine. So after this shift in perception, I will not drink past a buzz because I don't want to miss out on life, right? Where before I was like, yeah, numb this because it doesn't feel good at all. I'm free. I'm free from that, but it was a shift in perception and a realization of what the hell was driving me that allowed me to let it go and still have it in my life. And it has absolutely no control. It's like now we can engage and have a glass of wine and not be considered some addict and how people, you got problems. We all have problems. We all just soothe in different ways, right? So that was a huge one for me. And so it was the aura of the seizure that was coming on, the seizure.
Now, you had already been a hospice nurse prior to this NDE,
Yes.
and you've probably seen some paranormal stuff.
Yes.
After your NDE, did it change you as a hospice nurse at all?
It did. It did because as I knew there was something more going on in the whole death and dying process, but I was indoctrinated to the same thing that everybody here in the United States is. It's scary. It's, you don't know, that sort of thing. As I moved into it and I started working with people, I realized they got this story wrong. There's a whole lot more going on here. And what has happened is I've been given information on how to share with my patients what they might be going through as they're going through these moments of their end of life journey, right? And to help empower them, to let them know we might not have control over the diagnosis of what we have that's going to be the part of our end of life journey. But we do have the power on how we choose to perceive it, how we choose to live the remainder of our time in this physical form, what medicines we want, what medicines we don't want. We have a lot of choice, but it takes a willingness to kind of talk about death and dying and get to a place of maybe accepting that we all go there, right? The fact that it's still so taboo and it's an absolute, we will change physical form as we have been since our birth. We've been changing physical form the entire time. But this is a new birth into a new realm of the non-physical. I don't necessarily know what all that's about, but I do know that as people, I think that what has happened is, as we move through in hospice, we have what we call terminal agitation. That terminal agitation, I believe now, is the same thing that I experienced. My reviewing, my being given the glimpse of what my biggest block was, and that was abandonment. In the moment of going through that review, it's not anybody reviewing outside of me, it's me seeing it through the eyes of the ego mind. And then I was given the gift to see it beyond the ego mind when I came out of it. So um, I have seen soul twice leave other people's body. Um, and when I could be in that space with somebody completely sober, like my best friend, I said, I'm going to do this the hardcore way. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to see what's happening. I'm not going to numb myself on this one. It was the most beautiful rebirthing I have ever experienced. It was magical. And I still have communication with him to this day. And I hope I have enough time to share a story with you. Just kind of, everybody has these little stories, but I have my own personal one too. But yes, I've seen people struggle through the reviewing of where they've been in their life. And we do have medications, right, that can help people ease that. But we also, I feel I've been given a gift to help people mentally understand what might be happening, right? If we get to them early enough, sometimes they can see that they can choose their end of life journey. They can choose what their heaven's going to be like. That's how powerful we are, but we've not been shown the power that we have in our culture. But in any stage of life, whether it's the end of the journey of life or in your midlife crisis journey of life, you have the power on how you choose to respond to that you are seeing coming into you. And it is the internal part of it that I believe we move through in those near-death experiences where people either are in heaven or in hell. I believe that, the people that see the light, they got closer to it than I did. And now looking back, that what I thought was lava was actually the light coming in to show me a different perspective. Right at the time, I was just like, oh, cover my head and bend over. Like, I don't know what to do. But in my quiet time, I was shown that was your fear of that was in your mind. It was the light of God that was right there, and you were too afraid to look at it. So, and I think I'm not alone in that, right? I'm not alone in that. So it has helped me tremendously and help people move through as in birth, in the physical realm, it can be a little bumpy, right? It can be a little bumpy, get squished, it's not so comfortable all the time. As we're birthing out of this physical realm, it can be a little bumpy. It's, squishy, don't feel so well. But I can assure you that bumpy part will pass. And what awaits on the other side is beyond what I know, but I know it to be grand. It's an evolution of you into your soul, back to your higher source, that connection. And I believe in that space, that's where you get to see all things without judgment, but for what it is. For what it is. It's not to point blame at anybody but to say, oh, I see that your reaction to me or this event is your hurts. And how we choose to move through that death process, we can choose that. We can choose to be a victim of it, or we can choose to be empowered and grow and learn from it. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Would you say then that there is truly no hell where people are going to burn for eternity?
Absolutely. There is no hell. The hell is what we create here and now. The hell is the blocks and the barriers and the beliefs that we've accepted as solid and non-movable that block us from being the best version of who we can be and really get to know who we are authentically without, fear of if you've got a little quirk, you don't try and hide it because you're afraid of what your neighbor, but just to glow and show your light and be who you are. Absolutely. Absolutely.
What does it look like to see someone leaving their body when they're transitioning over?
So the physical form, of course, as it's starting to slow down and be non-productive for the soul that it holds, there are significant changes that happen with the physical body. So as people are approaching that transitionary stage, which is usually can be like a month, but as they even get closer, say the 3 days out, there's a lot of physical things that we will see that will give us an indication that soul is separating from the physical form. One of them is people's appetite and thirst drive completely goes away. And that is because as the body is slowing down, it can't process those things. So life force energy, God, whatever you call that, has given us a mechanism where it becomes difficult to swallow. It's not uncomfortable at all. There's no drive from the patient to, oh, I'm so hungry, I'm so thirsty. That is all diminished. And so it becomes harder for people to eat and swallow, and therefore they stop. And then that is, no more. We're letting no more in. People want to feed, right? But if we do that, we are actually pushing something into a system that's slowing down, and we can cause more havoc. So my hope too in sharing this sort of thing is that I can take the fear component away of dying, and put more truth to it and what's physically actually happening, and help people understand. And it's just a separation from the physical form, the soul connection, right? And so, yeah, it's going to be a birthing process. And yeah, but it's nothing that you haven't been through before. It's no harder than your worst nightmare that you had during this lifetime. And it can actually be as beautiful as birth if you're willing to open your mind to seeing it that way.
What I meant by the question is, I believe that a couple times you saw someone's spirit leaving their
Yes.
body. Does it look
Yes.
like a cloud leaving their body? Or?
Oh, okay. Thank you for bringing me back to that. So what it looks like, it's on the exhale the last exhale that I've seen it. It happened with my friend Brett, and it happened with a person who was dying in the facility that I was the risk manager, that I had become very tight with and had bonded with, that soul connection. And it looks like, how when you're pumping gas and you can see an image behind it, but the gas fumes distort it. House or a mirage where like it's a distortion of you can see behind it, but there's something that distorts it a little bit, like a film that distorts it. That's essentially what it looked like. It's not a formative sort of thing. It's a formless wave of, in my vision was like a film almost, or a transparency that has a shape but not a form, if that makes sense. It doesn't have like arms, legs, whatever, but it's just a form of energy that can be seen, and it looks a bit transparent. I don't know if that's a good way to describe it. I've never really thought about that. But that's the best I can do as far as trying to describe what that looked like as they took that last exhale. And I could see their face behind them, but there was also a film. Or do you have a word for me?
It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Right?
It's transparent, no form, but a high vibration energy that is just to be in its presence and be aware of it there's not a drug I think that you could take that could get you that high.
It reminds me of being on an airplane, and when you're taxiing on the runway, or when it's kind of starting up the engines, if you look either before or behind the engine, it kind of looks fuzzy kind of thing.
Yes, that's a good one. That is a good one. That is exactly what it's like. But you can tell that, it's not so expansive that you can't, as it leaves the body, in my experience, it's very much moving, out and extending into all that is.
After your experience, did you note that you had any new abilities that could be considered psychic?
The terms that we use are, psychic and that woo-woo, and people they miss the big picture when you attach to those words. So when I hear psychic, I think, are you for real? Right? And I'm sure I'm not alone in that. So I don't necessarily want to say psychic. I've just become more in tune to, more aware. And so in my awareness, I can hear that voice tell me the answer to something I don't know the answer to. I can beckon things to me in playing with life. I had a situation where in the early days of doing this, I thought, okay, if I can manifest anything I want, I'm going to manifest a yellow bird. Well, in my area, there's not, I don't think I'd ever seen a yellow bird. If I had, it didn't catch my attention enough for me to absorb that there's yellow birds in the area. So I sat down in my chair and I said, okay, let's go. And I was like, I see yellow birds, bring yellow birds. I feel that, I did all this stuff in my mind going, okay, maybe this is the way, maybe this is not the way. I live in an RV, so I have a big window that I'm sitting on my recliner looking out that window, waiting for these birds. That sounds kind of crazy if you tell somebody that, right? So, well, the birds didn't come. So I was like, well, that don't work. So the next day I came home and I ran in, went to put the dog food down and do my evening chores. And I hear this knock at that big window that I was looking out. And there is a yellow bird on the steps that go up to the top of the camper, bouncing like a penguin. And so I reach over, I get my camera, and I got a video of it. It's like, you can't make this up. You cannot make this up. What I know is that was probably happening all before my near-death experience. I just wasn't tapped in and tuned into it, right? I couldn't see it because I wasn't in that mindset. But there's been a few things that you just can't make it up. There's something going on here, and I can't describe it exactly to a T, but if you're open to it, it blows you away. And then it gets to a point where you just say, oh, you can't deny it anymore. It's just the sequencing of events that you think of something and then it comes to you. It's just like, did that just really happen? Nah. And you'll try to talk yourself out of it. But now I've been doing it long enough that I have no doubt. That's how powerful we actually are. Yeah.
The higher vibrations voice that you hear, would you say it's your higher self or complete self on the other side, or something else?
Absolutely. So it is the highest version of me within me. It's not outside of me. It's and I think that's where so many of us have been taught that is outside, that God is outside, that the happy is outside, that satisfaction is outside. It's totally within. It is, you can't be separate from, right? There was an analogy one time that was the two of them that were given to me that kind of helped me absorb this in my, because I'm a skeptic now, so I got to be able to, like Jonah and the whale, it's got to make sense to me. But one is that if you take a pie and say that God is this pie, life force energy is this pie, this whole pie, and that represents that we call God, or Mother Nature, whatever you call that. And you remove a slice of the pie, the piece is over here, but it is still a part of the whole. Even though it's been removed, it can't be totally removed because it's the essence of the whole. It's a piece of it. So I look at God now like not this big scary guy in the sky that's going to judge us, but as that energy that is the extension of life force that we are all a part of. You can't be separate. We come from that component. We come from God. We come from the love of light. We come from that place of pure, what people describe as pure love, unconditional love, light, warmth in their, NDEs. We come from that, and we're going right back to that. It's just, this is a part of the physical journey that we're doing, right? We're part of this physical journey, but that's absolutely not the end.
You mentioned earlier that you had a story about your friend you wanted to share.
So this is one of my stories that you just can't make up, right? So and in Brett's last month or so of life, I don't remember exactly when, but it was towards the end of his physical transition. I was driving to the store to pick up his, of all things, narcotic medication, his comfort meds for what he was going through. I was driving to the store to pick that up from the pharmacy, and I live kind of out in the country, you can see. And so I was on a country road, and as I'm driving, I'm not going very fast, maybe 35 miles an hour. I noticed this little flicker of something in my front light. And I thought, well, that is the coolest thing. And it hung with me for a second. And I thought, what in the word is that? Like that, it's reflecting. It looks like a little fairy or a little angel, or that's the coolest thing. Well, Brett was open to different realities and different things. And, he wasn't closed-minded. And that's one of the gifts he gave me as well, to look into things that you don't necessarily understand and be curious about it, right? So when I got home, I mentioned it to him. I said, I just saw the coolest thing in my little front light as I'm driving. It almost looked like an angel. And he said, oh, you're talking about the angel moth. Angel moth? I don't know what that is. And he said, you know, that big moth, that angel moth, you don't see them a whole lot, but they're real big and beautiful, and they're iridescent, and it was reflecting the light from your car. And then I thought, oh, well, maybe I know what that is. And so I look it up and I see it. It's actually called a lunar moth, but he called it an angel moth. So I had always shared with him that I know that we are connected at soul. I know we are soul friends. I know that we have a soul agreement because I've learned so much in our interaction. And I said to him, I want you to, if there is such a thing as connecting back to me when you are gone from this physical form, you have to do that, please. Like, that's the one gift you could give me for staying out of work for 15 months with your butt, right? Just do that for me. So after he passed away, he was cremated, and we did get to live the last 15 months in so much joy and in so much life, and it was just a miracle. Even though his physical body was failing, we had the best time. And so after he passed, I had some of his ashes, and there was a few places that he didn't get to go, right? He didn't get to go before he left the physical form. And so I thought, well, I'm going to strap your butt into the car in your little ash box, and we're going to go to the mountains of North Carolina, and I'll sprinkle you around the breweries that you wanted to go to, and I'll do all that stuff. So I do that. And ironically, I'm meeting my birth mother's sister, who I didn't even know existed, for the very first time in that journey, by, what is that? Oh, where you do the genetics, and she popped up and I didn't even, anyway, that's a whole nother story. But so as I come home, I'm driving home, and it was just magical. And I was thinking about our fun times, and I really felt like he was with me, and I was feeling like he was appreciating, but I'm still not getting like any certain, come on, I want something real certain. Well, you can see what my drive looks like. It's very barren and grassy and dirt. And there's a lot of wildlife out here. I love it. It's beautiful. But I pull into the driveway, and I was like, okay, that's the end of the journey. It was dark. I opened the door, and the light from the door, you know, the bottom of the door, reflected down. Are you ready for this? And on the ground was this perfectly intact lunar moth. And so I was like, holy, this is it. This is so it. Because nobody else knew that story but he and I. So I was able to get that little sucker up, and you can see I framed it because, of course, that is my visual proof that there is stuff that we don't see that is absolutely there communicating with us. So yeah, that's my little nugget from him.
Michelle, after watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that?
Oh, you know, I didn't think about that, but absolutely I am open to that. So please know that I do have that my full-time hospice job, which I love. And so I do have extra time in the afternoon. But with my closed head injury, if something's not right in front of me, I might forget. So if somebody wanted to reach out through my Facebook Messenger, I am more than happy to engage. And if I can help anybody kind of level up to that next level and get to living heaven on earth, oh, what an honor and privilege. And if it doesn't resonate with you, that's okay too. I'm just grateful that people are here to be exposed to this stuff.
Before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Take the time to get to know who you are at the heart and soul of who you are, and move into that highest vibration and connection and live life from that place. It's more of a heart-centered place. And man, heaven's just going to be a bonus, right? Heaven's going to be a bonus because this really can be heavenly like. So yeah, and it's available to everyone.
Michelle, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.